Hi, it's David from Formpro Ratings. We're going to try and add a few more videos and podcasts and vidcasts to the various sites over the next couple of weeks and months. I thought one of the things that could be useful for some of our subscribers is to have a look in a little bit more detail at the Predictor. The Predictor has been having an outstanding run over the last really since the lockdown finished. On Tuesday at Palmerston North, 7 out of the 12 races were top picks for the Predictor, and the same happened at Eddington. Doesn't happen every day, so one of the things that can be really useful is understanding when to emphasise the Predictor and perhaps when not to. So I'm just going to have a look at my selections from Tuesday. We had a good day. We all make mistakes, and I'm still learning from those, so I'll have a look at that as well. So what I'll do is I'll go through my main selections from Tuesday and provide some thoughts around how the ratings helped me. So here are my ratings, so my selections. I've adopted a 10-unit strategy approach, and the reason for that is that it makes it easier for anyone to see if I'm providing any value with my selections. Believe me, I don't know how Neil does it. It's a tough gig doing this. But to be fair, it's something that I found has helped me as a punter. Let's have a look at the first race, which is the one that I think I got wrong. I made a comment, and again, it's up to you how you find, where you find your success. I do find, because I rely on the ratings and the data, that the C0 races give me a hard time. And when I look at this race, again, I'll explain why I made the decision that I did. I made Big Time Queen, I think, a 3-unit bet. And the reason for that was that it was in a money back race. And looking at that, I didn't think that there was a lot of early speed. Based on the first run at Hattrick, the speed map suggested that it should jump and run. But because it was an inexperienced dog, it got caught up in traffic from the squeeze boxes, and that was all she wrote. Just a comment about one of the changes that I've made just in the last couple of weeks. We used to just provide a number for the speed map, which wasn't really, or for the box speed, which wasn't necessarily helpful. One of the things I've done is to convert that into the value into a color, and you can see the green is the dogs that have the early speed, the red are the slow ones. And I think I'm most likely, looking at that, I got sucked into the early speed. But of course, that was based on one start. It was based on one start at Hattrick, and all of that information was right in front of me. So when you look at this, it's a race that you would say, well, Big Time Queen might win, but can you say with a high degree of confidence? Well, the confidence actually says no, so I should have learned from that. So it wasn't necessarily the best start to the day, but we have had some successes with those C0 races, although, as I said, it had been a mantra of mine not to bet on them. Let's go to the next race, which was my bet of the day, which was M Grand Rose. And I think the ratings did a superb job here. First and foremost, if you look at the best, we can see that 2 dogs stood out. If we look at the best track and distance time, again, there were 3 dogs that had run high fast times, and Hot Platter was the third. And Hot Platter, as we can see from its best, which is its time or best time in the last 6 starts, just isn't really in form. And we can see that it doesn't like the outside draw as well. So it was very, very hard not to see that it was a race that was really limited to 2 dogs. And whilst I've been backing, I think I made Kamada Park one of my bets a couple of weeks back. As again, you can see very quickly from the stats, it's not a dog that jumps well from the outside boxes. Whilst it has a great record, admittedly, but it just doesn't like those outside boxes. And it's interesting, I think some people will dismiss speed maps for longer distance races, but again, the evidence is very strong that dogs that get out in front avoid trouble. And that's really what the information told us, that M Grand Rose, 3 wins from 4 starts from box 6, so it likes that draw. The speed map said that it was the likely leader, And the ratings told us that based on its last efforts, it was by far the top runner. And to be fair, in a 7-dog race, I was quite surprised that when it opened at $1.95, it opened at $1.95, which to my mind was extremely good value. And it's not often that it happens like that, but after the lids went up, we literally went and waited at if they have them, of course, these days, but we simply waited to get the payout because it was that comprehensive. So again, the predictor gave us absolute confidence that that was a good bet, and as it turned out, it was. Have a look at, if I can get that out of the way, let's close that, that'll do. The Big Time Angel race. Again, this is a runner that has had some problems from the starts, particularly inside draws. But we can see again that the predictor was pretty confident that it was the top runner. And again, if you look at the difference between the top 2 runners, that it really was a race in 2. Softy Burgess hadn't run and won from outside. The interesting thing for me about this race, and one of the reasons why Big Time Angel was a dog that I think we could look at, or you could have looked at punting in this race, even though we've had some issues with the starts in the past, there was no early speed in this race. Just one thing about the early speed, in terms of our metrics, the early speed actually is from the end of the back straight. So it's not the first 5 or 10 steps. So there can be issues there. But I think if we look at what the data was telling us, the mid-draw was fine. The speed map suggested that everything else being equal, that it would jump and run. And on the other side, it was clearly the dog with the best time and the best potential. So that was another, as it turned out, another good bet. And then on to the last race, and it's a dog that has cost me a bit over the few years, because Mother's Touch is one that does often rate well, but it, as I said in my comments, it's got no idea where the rail is, and around the top straight it goes via Foxton, so it does run wide. And so that was my concern about making it, about putting more than a unit on it. But again, if you look at the evidence based on the ratings, it had clearly the top, it had the second top tracking distance. Magic Flynn did have 57, but we can assume that was some time ago. Interestingly enough, Mother's Touch 56 was in its last 6 starts, and Mother's Touch had by far the best. And we can also see in this column here, where it says R1 and 2, one of the things that I changed about a year ago is that we always used to track the last race as an indication of whether a dog was in form or not. I'd now take the best of the last 2, because sometimes the dog can be in form, gets checked or bumped or whatever. So we can see there that the data suggested that it was a dog that everything else being equal was the best. The next rated was up in class, which is something that you tend to find dogs can look good at the class immediately below, and just a little increase in class can prove challenging. The interesting thing for me is that week after week, Yasawa Lights has gone out as favourite, and if you look at its, I looked earlier, and if you look at its starting price, 4 or 5 times I think it's gone around at $2 or less, and most of the times it's dipped out. And we can see from its best rating and best times, it simply hasn't run the time. And it may have greater potential, but again, it's been going out paying around that $2 mark. And yes, whilst it may have the potential, the evidence very strongly is that it hasn't demonstrated that potential in New Zealand. And so again, Yasawa Lights went out being a favourite. What I liked about Mother's Touch was that apart from the fact that clearly there were a lot of factors that suggested it was the best dog in this race, from the draw and with enough speed, it should be able to get out in front, and then it can waver around as it likes. And if it was going to run out and run into any problems, the competition ones, the runners that were most likely going to be affected. And so I was happy to put a unit on Mother's Touch. And again, the confidence came not from its running style, but from the fact that even though it was a wide runner, we could see enough in here that would suggest that it had a good chance. The other one that I ummed and ahed over for some time was in the first race at Eddington. And I wasn't 100% convinced, but when I look back, I think it again, it was an example of how the predictor can help deal with those type of concerns that you may have. So what wasn't I confident about? I would, in a sprint race at Eddington, I really like to see a dog that it's definitely going to get to the lead by the end of the first straight. A very high number, around 60% or more of sprint races are won by the first dog to the end of the back straight. And the speed map, it certainly wasn't a bad speed map, as we can see. We can see that it was expected to be up on pace. But there were one or two dogs that could pick the jump. Likewise, it didn't have a compelling record from box one, at least a winning record. 1 from 7 is not the greatest. And it had only won twice out of 29 starts. So there were a few things there that didn't necessarily give me great confidence. On the other hand, if we look at the things that did give us confidence, that made it certainly at nearly $4, it made it a very good value bet. It was clearly the top rated runner in this race. And if we look at its best start in the last 6 races was rated 62. So just in case you're not sure, the 62 refers to the mean for the course for the stats that we have. So 62 is a little bit above the mean being 50, the middle, and no dog had gone anywhere near running that. It was admittedly its best race, and sometimes dogs can't replicate that. We can see that from the 62 being the same as its top for sprints and its top for the track and distance. However, it also ran a 49 or rated 49 in its last 2 starts. And again, if we quickly compare that with the other runners, we can see that Mulberry Rock was most likely as good in terms of those last couple of races. And then the final part of the puzzle that in the end made me listed as one of the bets of the day was the fact that there really wasn't a lot of speed from the inside boxes. So dog 2 we expected was going to be very slow, relatively slow out, and was up in class. Box 3, we could see that perhaps it could be in the early rush, but its best was a 41, and that's well and truly below what Mulberry Rock had. And then finally, if we look at the dog that worried me the most, which actually, if I remember correctly, actually did have the lead at some stage, Ginger Cream Fizz. It's a dog that's most likely, like me, seen better days. But if we look at the evidence in front of us, and particularly with the value, I wouldn't have punted it if it was, say, under $3. But we got really good value on the fixed odds. And what's interesting for me is, again, actually, if I just quickly go here to confirm what we got it, oh no, we didn't, $3.70. And by the time the race was run and won, it paid $2.40 on the tote. So doing your homework, particularly for the dogs, can pay dividends. And as you can see, that the ratings can be a really useful way, particularly on a day when there's, say, 24 races. The ratings can be very, very helpful in narrowing down the races that you want to dig into and get more confidence of your bets. As always, if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you for popping by, and we'll add another one in the next week or so. Cheers.